but I found myself standing on a scale and it was reading 376 pounds.
Oh,
So all those decades of ignoring my health, ignoring my fitness, ignoring my own self-care, had led to this.
today's guest is Charles Fielder. He's a leadership capacity coach who works with high performing professionals who are constantly giving more than they have. His work is rooted in his own story. You see, after years of weight struggles, chronic overexertion, and eventually a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, Charles was forced to confront the cost of putting his health last. I think this is really going to resonate with EMS professionals who often do the same thing. But through expert guidance and small intentional changes, Charles was able to rebuild his health and discovered how quickly capacity erodes when self care is postponed, and how powerful it is when vitality is restored. This episode shares a personal experience, not medical advice. Always talk with a qualified healthcare professional about your own health decisions. Let's get into it. Well, Charles, thank you so much for being on the EMTS Academy podcast.
It's great to be here. It's wonderful to talk about all kinds of topics, but this one's near and dear to my heart. So let's
Yeah.
go.
Well, Charles, the reason I invited you on here is because you and I made a connection and you have an amazing backstory. So why don't you start with that?
Yeah, so I retired from tech about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and immediately got a diagnosis from my doctor that I was diabetic. And while I was not surprised by this, it wasn't shocking given lots of signs over the years, it still shook me, right? So there was some discussion about going on a GLP-1, Ozempic or Manjaro at the time. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this myself and white knuckle it if I have to. And I'm going to make it work. But she left me with this little nugget in my brain saying, Charles, it's going to be so much easier to white knuckle if you come do that off when you're coming off medication rather than trying to get there. So this will help you get there, then you can white knuckle to keep it, right? And that's just sort of stuck with me, even though I was resigned to stick with go my own way. But ultimately, I did the research, talked to a family member who'd been on Ozempic and had some good results, and decided to, heed her advice. The voice really kept gnawing at me, and I called her back, said, "Let's do this." And so I started on Manjaro, and
I'm going to pause you
um,
right there for a second
yeah,
because I want to hear what life was like when you were working in the tech world. What was your level of fitness? What was your overall health like?
yeah. So through through the years, I mean, I was always highly energetic, right? That energy went all into my work and all that I do, right? Beginning of my career, I was working 14-hour days. I loved it, right? My wife would call me and say, honey, it's time to come home, right? So, I always had high energy and that went really all the way through my career. The problem is, I always wanted to do more and more and learn more and serve more and get more results. And that required staying up later, getting up earlier. I drank a lot of soda. I became addicted to soda, drinking liters a day, right?
Wow.
That changed my eating habits as well. I was eating more quickly, trying to get food here and there where I could. For a while we had a cafeteria, but then it was fast food. And it was, you want to go where you can get it fast, or you wanted something good, in which case you're eating a lot more of it. And of course, I was not eating mindfully. I was eating for taste and gratification, right? And so, yeah, well, I guess I'll say I entered my career, I wouldn't say I was particularly fit, but I was, in the normal range, let's say, maybe
Sure.
at the chubbier end of normal, right? But after 30, almost 30 years, about 27 years of this, I found myself standing on a scale in the doctor's office. It was a few years back, a few years before this diagnosis, but I found myself standing on a scale and it was reading 376 pounds.
Oh,
So all those decades of ignoring my health, ignoring my fitness, ignoring my own self-care, had led to this. And The interesting thing is, that kind of shook me at that time too, right? And it only caused me to make a couple small changes. I gave up soda at that time, and I did stop the weight gain. I went down about 20 pounds, and I hovered around there for the next few years until I got that follow-on diagnosis, right? So, yeah, I mean, in tech, I was busy all the time. I'm sure that's very much like people in your field, and you're taking your meals where you can get them, and you're prioritizing everything else for that, right? So you start off with good intentions, but those intentions go by the wayside because you're giving priority to all these other things, for your career, for these people you serve, for these people that you're helping, right? And as a leader, I my work was service, much like yours. It's just in a different way, right?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point. In EMS, we're always thinking about serving other people. It's what we do. And I've looked at the idea that how you get your dopamine can either help you or hurt you. And in EMS, it's the same kind of thing. We have this really weird, bizarre thing that we want to be at the worst accident, the biggest plane crash, whatever it is. And we get this sick high from it. And you also were probably getting dopamine in a different way, but you're actually helping people in tech and you're doing a lot of good work and you're on task and focused. And food is a secondary thing. And that's kind of this dopamine makes you forget about eating. And so you're just consuming calories. And I'm guessing that the sodas that you were drinking, those were not diet sodas.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
And
Yeah, it was.
sugar has this really bad thing that it doesn't turn off the switch in your stomach that says you're full. And so you keep eating and eating and eating. And so I think where this really applies is if you're working in EMS right now and you're not taking healthy snacks with you, or you're just going to the EMS break room at the hospital and you're grabbing whatever chips or sugary drinks they have, you're going to end up in a bad place. And
Right.
thankfully, you had a wake up call. So let's keep going and tell us a little more about it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's multiple wake up calls that hit you, and the problem is the dopamine, the other effects, the addiction to sugar, the addiction to chasing that next big high, whether it's the food high or the EMS, big accident, or for me, if it was that next big project or helping somebody get to their next level, right? These all feed on each other, right? And it's not, again, there's really good intention behind all of it, except maybe the food thing, but that's a lack of intention, right? We start off with the intention to stay healthy, and we just lose track of it. So to me, that was the big lesson that came out of all this was, you know, all the way up to the time I'm resisting my doctor's advice to go on this drug that could dramatically change my path. And by the way, it did, right? So as of this morning, I'm down 143 pounds, 142 pounds from the time that I saw the doctor, right?
Congratulations. That's
So
amazing.
yeah, it's on top of that, it's created just an entire health transformation, right? I'm off 2 blood pressure medications. All of my labs, my biomarkers are in the green zones, all of them. That hasn't happened since I was a teen. I don't even know if it happened when I was a teen. And so, when we pay attention to our body and when we listen to our body and when we put it first, then it helps us be that healthier self, and it helps us serve those we want to serve better, right? And so fundamentally, that's what's driving me. I want to continue to do this. I want to do it till, I'm in the grave, but I can't do that. Or maybe I'll say it differently. I'll be in the grave much sooner if I don't put my self-care first, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing out of this. And so, I very quickly got into this drug and it pharmaceutical, and it gave me immediate results. Like within 24 hours, my appetite was severely curbed, and that was interesting. But within a few days, all of my cravings, everything around sugar and bread, which I loved, I craved none of it anymore. It was like a total absence of cravings, which for me really helped me to start to be able to go at the weight loss and in a more systematic way. Before, it was all the food noise would get in the way of doing the right thing. I could rationalize my way out of everything, right? I'll
Mhm.
exercise next week when I have more time. I'll pick up some new habits after Christmas. right? We've got the holidays coming and this is bad time for food, right?
Yeah.
So, this absence of food noise has given me the ability to go, today is the best day to take one new step and to take another step along the same path I was on. So what I've done to make this successful, because a lot of people on these drugs don't have this kind of success, and a lot of people don't have much success. A lot of people actually get off of it quickly. Like half of people are off of it within 6 months, right?
Well, why
And
is
it's
that?
because of side effects and not being able to manage their lives the same way, right? The food choices now become a whole different game, right? A whole
Hmm.
different series of things to worry about, or you're not worried about it at all, and those around you start to worry, right? So ultimately, though, it comes back to how do you move this forward, right? And so for me, it came after going for my first follow up after starting this medication. My doctor, essentially scolded me. I felt it was a scolding because I had some lab tests that showed I was malnourished. I wasn't getting enough protein and some other micronutrients. And so that was showing in my lab results. And so I was like, well, I just started taking the medication, like you said, right? And she's like, well, you need to change the way you eat as well, right? I'm like, oh, well, you didn't say that. So, I've been eating everything the same, just less of it, right? And
Hmm.
maybe I eat less sugar. I didn't eat as much dessert because I just didn't have room for that after eating other stuff, but I still ate poorly, right?
Yeah.
So what I started doing coming from that, she gave me a protein target, said I want you to hit that at least every day. At the time, it was 90 grams, and 30 grams per meal plus one snack with 10 grams is what she was proposing. And I'm like, well, that looks like an impossibility given my appetite. So how do I move this forward? And so I actually started using a food tracker. I use this tool called Chronometer. It's like my Fitness Pal.
Hmm.
Um, and I started using that to track all my intake. I decided I was going to do this for 2 weeks to just kind of get a feel for what it looks like. And it was so informative. It just really shed the light on a lot of, you know, bad perceptions, a lot of misinformation in my own head. And I've never stopped since then tracking. So for over 2 years, I've been tracking everything I eat. And the, again, and I'm still learning from it, by the way, 2 years
Yeah.
into it.
Sure.
So, fundamentally what it's helped me to start to look at things in terms of data, right? Because, the data can't lie. People
Right.
can use data to, change things, change perceptions, to influence, but the data doesn't lie. The data is real. And so again, without the food noise poisoning it, it's
Hmm.
really easy to then start using that data to make decisions. So if I'm not making the progress I need, what is the data telling me? Right? So every time I reach a plateau, that's what I ask myself. And each one of those got me through a deeper cycle of learning. So I learned all about protein. I learned that 90 grams wasn't enough for my body weight, right?
Hmm.
That's enough to stay nourished or to not be malnourished, but it's not enough to thrive, right? And so eventually I had to learn, okay, well, why? Okay, I'm eating more protein. I'm going over 90 grams now. It's hard, but I also had to break the rules of, like eating past 9 p.m. and all these things because I had to be able to fit it all in a day, right? And so once I got through understanding all that and sort of keeping, my progress moving forward, I started looking at the other macronutrients and micronutrients and what is the data around those telling me, right? So, oh, I'm still eating far too much fat, and that means my calories are higher. So then I started paying attention to total calories, right?
So if somebody's starting out on this journey and maybe they do or don't take like a GLP-1, but they they realize this is a wake-up call, we're coming up to a new year, where should I start? You think that the metric that they should start looking at, would that be protein? Would it be weight? Would it be calories? Because did taking the medication change that for you and maybe for others?
Yeah. So, I mean, my advice to anybody right now, the first thing is I to me, I think the most impactful thing to do would be to start tracking what you eat, right? And you don't even have to set any specific targets. Just make sure it's tracking everything you eat, You don't have to show anybody else. You don't have to judge yourself. Just let it tell you the story of what you're eating. And, I mean, an example, we would sometimes go out to eat twice a day, right?
Hmm.
And what I found out from that was even when we were making healthy choices, me and my wife, we would come back and look at, 2 meals worth of calories and go, wow, we're already over our suggested appetite budget for our bodies, right? And that's not even, somebody on a deficit. That's just our regular diet, right? So, just by having 2 restaurant meals. And
Wow.
so the things that you can learn, these assumptions you make about what you're eating, get put into the sort of the light of truth, right?
Yeah.
And so again, the data doesn't lie, right? Whereas your mind, your perceptions of what you eat totally do.
you, you can make a lot of excuses. Earlier this year, I had gotten out of the habit of exercising. I was still going for walks around the neighborhood, but I had really stopped doing vigorous exercise. And so I signed up at a local gym and I started going to the pool and swimming. And to your point about you just need to start somewhere, I
Mhm.
set the lowest goal possible. On day one, I just had to go to the gym and get in the pool, and that was it.
Right,
I didn't have
right,
to swim a lap. I
right,
maybe I set a goal to swim one lap. But what that did is it made sure that I got my swimsuit ready. I knew where my fins and my goggles and everything were. And so then once I could swim down and back, I could quit if I wanted. But what I realized is once I was there, it
right,
was okay. I could do whatever I wanted. And the next, so once I set that goal and I hit it, that gave me a self-confidence boost. And then the next thing that I did is I said, I'm going to go down and back. And so I went down and back and I was winded. And so I said, I'm going to sit on the wall for a minute. So I timed myself for a minute and then I went down and back again. And before long, it was like magical. I no longer had to sit on the wall. And one day I'm like, I just swam for 30 minutes without, taking more than a couple sips of water.
right.
And it's sometimes I think progress in anything is like a helicopter starting up. It starts with one rotation. It's really, really slow, all that energy going into it. But then when you get it going, you can lift off and go just about wherever you want.
No, that's a great analogy. And again, you hit on data, multiple points of data as well that, wow, I just got faster. I was timing myself. I got to 30 minutes and I didn't even notice, right? So yeah, every piece of data now is meaningful to me. And I'm ravenous for it now because it gives me something to reach for to get me over that inertia that you're talking about to say, okay, I really don't want to work out today, but once I get there and start doing it, I'm loving it. I'm having a good time. I'm making it happen, and I'm feeling good. And when you do it regularly, you get the equivalent of the runner's high, right? Dopamine in a
Yeah.
good way, right?
Yeah, achievement is dopamine now, right?
Yeah,
Looking
yeah.
at your data and saying I moved it in the right direction. Dopamine, self-esteem. How has it affected your relationship with your wife or your coworkers or your energy to do your job?
Yeah, I mean, the energy wise, I mean, I'm working out typically 4 to 7 days a week, right?
Oh,
Based on the week. And some of my weightlifting workouts are 90 minutes, and some of them are even 3 hours, right? I didn't have any kind of energy to do anything like that before, right? I've taken over cooking because it doesn't stress me out to work on what it takes to meal plan and to do some hybrid prepping, what I call hybrid prepping, so that my wife and I can have our proteins and we can use them differently, but we have the same proteins to eat, for a few days. And so, that de-stresses her from it and helps me and her. And so, yeah, from a relationship perspective, it's helped in that regard.
I have to
You know,
ask, how are you getting 90 grams of protein? Because that seems really high. And you said
oh,
it should actually be even higher than that.
yeah, I'm actually my current target is like 140 to 150 grams a day.
Wow.
And that's based on multiple formulas, including just I went and got a body scan and body composition scan and looking at just the lean mass and what I need to keep the lean mass fueled. This is the amount that's needed, especially if I'm continuing to work out.
Is the
So
formula like one gram of protein for 1 kilogram of body weight?
so
Something like that?
there's so the rule of thumb, I'm going to call it rule of thumb,
Sure.
is 0 0.8 to about, really it can go to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight.
And I'm
So,
gonna, in
and
case anybody is not familiar with kilograms, I know that our audience is EMTs and paramedics, but if you're wondering how many kilograms you weigh, take your weight and divide by 2.2.
right,
So a 225 pound, or sorry, 220 pound person divided by 2.2 is 100
100
kilograms, just
kilograms,
for as a point of reference.
right, right. And so, there's a lot of misinformation out there that say, they actually apply, 1 to 2 grams per pound, and that's actually too
Mm.
much, right? So there's lots of papers that say anything over 1.8 doesn't actually add any additional benefit, and there is potential that it can hurt your kidneys and other things, right?
Mhm.
So ultimately, for me, I've zeroed in on about a 1.3 to 1.5 range for me, given that I'm on the GLP-1 and I'm actively trying to build lean tissue. And so, and I'm active in doing so, right? And
Mhm.
so, you want to be on the lower end if you're more sedentary, and on the
Mhm.
higher end if you're more active, right? And so yeah, the 1.3 to 1.5 is where I'm targeting. And so for me, 150, 140 to 150 grams a day. And so, I typically try to get between 30 to 40 in breakfast, and I typically do that with either combination of yogurt, nuts, fruit, and I guess that's mostly what we'll work together in that. I take 2 cups of yogurt, put them together, Greek yogurt, unsweetened, no additives, but
Yep.
I sweeten it with the berries. But I do add nuts like almonds or seeds,
Mhm.
pepitos, right?
Yeah.
And get some fiber, and get everything that we need out of that. So then for lunch, I typically have chicken or pork tenderloin or beef, and for dinner, the same. It's just usually paired with something, right? And you know, naturally, I'm going to try to go towards the leaner cuts, right? So I eat a lot of chicken breast now, which I didn't used to. I
Mhm.
loved chicken legs, right? And especially when it's fried. So now it's almost never fried.
Yeah.
And but I flavor it more, right? And I do different things. I season it in different ways. Pork tenderloin is a good one. And I actually use beef tri-tip because it's one of the leaner cuts. There's leaner cuts, but it's one that actually also tastes good and doesn't make you feel like you're chewing cud. So,
Oh, yeah.
so yeah, I think that, I combine it with other high nutrient foods. So, we'll pair it with beans. So that gives you carbs and protein along with it, right? Or with rice, but we'll, try to go with whole grain rice and that sort of thing, or quinoa, or we have this quinoa bulgur mix that we get from HEB, right?
Mhm. Nice.
So, these things, all of these bits of protein start to add up. And, if I need to, I also will do protein supplements, through a protein shake. But, I try to stay away from that because I want to get it all from Whole Foods where I can, right? But, I'll probably do protein supplements maybe once or twice a week.
Yeah. So I know that part of the challenge with GLP-1s is that there's this risk of you start losing weight and then people stop taking the medication and
Right,
sometimes they gain weight back with interest, right?
right.
And so I think what you're doing is so amazing because I'm guessing a lot of people just hit the easy button and they take the medication and they don't change their diet. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
maybe
I,
some do,
I did
but
that.
yeah, I
I
mean, right?
started there, right?
Yeah. And then, but what's interesting is that it changed your mental chemistry or whatever so that you no longer wanted those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I,
how will
I,
you sustain this when you come off the medication? And then how long do most people stay on this?
Yeah, so there's not much data on that yet. There is a large number of people that get off of it after a year, again, because of the complications it brings to their lives. And again, for me, I think my conclusion is that, a lot of them aren't doing it because they weren't given the guidance. They were stumbling around in the dark like I was. I just happened to be, very research oriented, and without the food noise in the way, I was able to, to carry it forward and continue to make it work and make it work and I'm still making it work, and still progressing down to my target. I want to get down to about 185, right? That's ultimately where I want to be, and maintain that. And so yeah, I think the keys are, you know, it's just like as if you don't take you don't take these medications. You've got to make lifestyle changes and develop habits that will sustain this, right? So, am I going to be successful coming off of it and not gaining weight? I don't know for sure. There's not a lot of evidence that a lot of people have been successful. Some have, but it's a minuscule percentage. I hope
Yeah.
to be one of those small percentage, but I hope that, it's because of those habits that I've been building and the lifestyle changes that I've made that, even I've been off of it a couple times in this 2 years that I've been on it, once
Mhm.
for surgery and once I just took a break right from it. And, I didn't gain weight through it. My habits didn't change through it. I still was tracking. I was still doing all the things that I was doing before. And, maybe I paused on a weight gain. I'm sorry, on a weight loss, but I
Mhm.
didn't go up on any of them. And, ultimately, I won't be surprised if I gain a little weight. But yeah, my biggest challenge is going to be dealing with the cravings that may come back. They
Mhm.
may not come back the same way as well because I've been off of sugar for 2 years.
Well,
And
that's a hard drug to kick. A lot
yeah,
of
right.
people have truly said kicking sugar is actually harder than heroin, and that's coming from people who have been addicted to heroin and cocaine and some of these drugs. But that's how powerful it is. Some people label sugar as the devil, and I don't know if there's some truth to that. But I know that if I eat sugar like on a holiday weekend or something, for 4 or 5 days later, I'm really cranky and irritable, and yeah, it's really hard. Well, this is a fascinating journey. What would you say to somebody out there who's maybe on the fence? Maybe their doctor has told them you need to be on something and they're reluctant. What would you say?
Well, the first thing is, seek out the information you need to feel informed, right? So there's lots of you can use Google Scholar, you can use Google, you can use the Chat GPT and these kinds of things to help you locate papers. Don't just take their word for it, but actually get them to, have source the papers that you can read some of the summaries of, right? And whatever it takes, talk to a dietitian, right? There's some really good dietitians out there. There's some really less informed ones out there as well, just like with doctors. But find a dietitian who's got patients on GLP-1s, and get details you need from that. Ultimately, it's first and foremost about feeling informed, right? Second thing is, if you don't have any of the risks associated with the most adverse side effects, then think about whether it's going to get you to go faster, and can it help you like it did me in terms of dealing with the food noise while you work out building the habits and lifestyle changes that you need to make it last, right?
Yeah.
And talk about that with your doctor.
You keep saying food noise. I think I know what that is, but I've heard some people say that when you're eating crappy, it's almost like being at the bottom of an ocean and there's so much stuff above you that you're not hearing the good voices of food. That's the way one of my friends described it. But what is food noise to you?
Yeah, to me, it's all of these things. It's the cravings that are pulling you. It's like, ooh, that was good. Let me have another one, right? I used to make these little mini mocha brownies, right? And I challenge people to eat just one. I mean, they're just that good. But, for me, three was a perfect little quantile, right? And then I'd walk away and I'd come back by and I'd smell them again. Ooh, okay, three more, right? So that's food noise. It was it wasn't a craving until I smelled it, and I was like, ooh, got to have three more. And then there's well, it's only three, right? So the rationalization that is going on over here is drowning out the hey, you don't need that voice over here, right? And so
It
it's
sounds just
good.
like it sounds just like addict behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
They drive by some intersection where they used to get their stuff and they're looking and they're like, no, it's just one. I promise it's just going to be one this time. And pretty soon they're making excuses and they're justifying. I think when you said that you were addicted to sugar and addicted to food, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I definitely think so. And you know, this is the danger for me when I come off, right? I don't know how that's going to play into it again. I'm hoping that my lifestyle changes, both emotional, mental, as well as the physiological changes, are going to come into play to work together to act as the therapy that
Yeah.
makes it a sustainable recovery, right?
What would you say to somebody who's maybe sitting there thinking about this and they have that little voice in their head that says, aren't you just cheating? Aren't you taking a shortcut?
Yeah,
Did you ever
sure.
have that? And how
I,
did you deal with it?
I absolutely think it's a shortcut, and I don't know if, I don't know if it's going to end up working, right? There's no evidence to suggest that I can get off of it successfully, right? Let me rephrase. There's little evidence, and that's only because it's not been around long enough, and there's not been enough attention on what it looks to do it right, and there's not been enough studies on that either, right? And so they're just starting those studies now in this last year, and so yeah, but just like in business, there's moral cheating that's good for your goals, right?
Can you give me an example of that?
So instead of, let's say I need to, get this project done. If I'm the one who's responsible for it and I'm accountable for it, is it wrong if I go to my peers and, others in the company to say, hey, help me do this, help me do that. Can you do this for me? And we get it done together, and I'm taking time from them, taking away time from their priorities in the short term to help something that's helping us all in the long term because it's helping the company, right?
Sure.
So it's cheating in one sense, right? But again, I call it moral. It's not amoral cheating, right?
Right.
I'm not doing it at the expense of their goals. We're just, I'll pay them back, and so in this sense, this is the way I look at this right now. If it ends up not working, I either have to get back on it and stay on it for life, or I've got to, pursue therapy or, do something, some other medical intervention, right? To keep it from coming back.
When you go to the gym and you're working out and you're doing a bench press and you're at that point where your arms start shaking and yet somebody takes their two fingers on each side and lifts the bar up, is that cheating? And the answer is in some ways it is, but in some ways you're the one sitting there. You went to the gym, you got your workout clothes on, you got under the bar, you're pushing the weight. And so sometimes that's all we need is just that little bit of nudge
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
us a little bit further. So you're still the one taking the step. You're still the one taking the pill. You're still the one eating right and doing all these things. So I wouldn't look at it as cheating. I think it's getting you to a better place. And I think about it like you're going to live longer and serve more people with your time here on earth. So how is that a bad thing?
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I mean, that fully encompasses what I mean by moral cheating, right? If
Yeah.
you want to call it cheating. I don't care, but it's a moral version, and I'm good with it. And, the other point, and you kind of highlighted this in your last statement of, being able to serve more is, if you're the one with the two fingers helping them get up, you might have just saved them from having it crash back on their chest as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
that was the other big lesson about this whole journey for me was swallow your damn pride and take the help where it can help you, right? Because
Yeah.
people want to offer it genuinely. My doctor was trying to be genuine and help me, thrive, right? Not just live, but thrive. You know, Without that intervention, without her, actual intervention and the medical pharmaceutical intervention, I don't think I'd be where I am today, right? And, I've continued to take help throughout it. I did a lot of research on nutrition. I did a lot of research on fitness training, and, each barrier led to more research, right? And that's what fueled my progress all the way to where I am now. But the nutrition stuff, I, as a diabetic who's working out as hard as I am, I was, having a real hard time finding good guidance online and in books on what my carb target should be. So I sought out a really good dietitian with experience in this space and, you know, talked with her about it. And it was hugely informative. And to the point where she was even like, I want you to have a snack, pre-workout snack and a post-workout snack. Pre-workout one's optional, post-workout one is not optional. And by the way, I want it to have, 10 grams of protein and 15 grams of simple sugars. So she was like, chocolate milk is a perfect example. Later, I went back and said, what I've been doing is we have this leftover Halloween candy. I've been doing milk with that little candy, like peanut M&Ms. And she's like, perfect. I'm like, sweet, right? So
Yeah.
again, totally against what I would think, because I'm
Right.
diabetic.
Yeah.
But, she also explained why, and it made total sense, right? That, the sugar, yeah, the serum glucose acts as a transport mechanism for the protein that and the other things that your body needs as it's immediately recovering. So in the 45 minutes after your workout, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, and so it's just really important to go deep and understand these things yourself. And you don't have to chase it in the way that I do, but seek out authoritative sources of information. And there's just too much bad information on Insta and
Right.
TikTok, right?
Yeah. Be
So
careful who
you,
you follow for sure.
you really got to be careful, right?
Yeah. So Charles, what's next for you?
What's next for me? I'm pivoting my business actually around this concept. So I'm a leadership coach, but throughout tech, throughout corporate America, right, throughout healthcare, my wife is a nurse, a lifelong nurse, and so I've seen this in that side as well. You know, people are putting their work and everybody else's needs in front of their own, and we forget self-care, and that includes this physical stuff as well as emotional and mental and spiritual, creative well-being. All these well-being areas need to be attended to if you want to serve those that you serve best, and if you want to do it with longevity, right?
So are you going into companies and helping them set up some sort of wellness program?
No, I'm more of I work better one-on-one or one to a small number, right? So I'm coaching individuals and I'm doing some small group cohorts. I'm particularly interested in helping people who are feeling overlooked or underappreciated, but are really capable and strong contributors, and they're just not being given the opportunity to do what they want, and they're drained, or they're drained because they're trying too hard to fit the perfect image. And
Right.
so we need to work on building the capacity and restoring their vitality so that they can move that forward authentically, right, in a way that's natural to themselves, and that allows them to get through that unrelenting demands that they suffer, and turn it from suffering into results and impact, and use that to fuel and propel their way to advancing in the directions that they want, right?
Yeah. If people want to learn more about you or what you're doing, how can they find you?
Two quick ways are my website is charlesfielder.com. I'm in the process of updating that for my new direction,
Sure.
but also on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Charles Fielder. So I'll
Hey,
share the links with you and we
yeah, we'll
can
put
have
those in
a,
the show notes for sure.
yep. All right.
And finally, Charles, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you or anything else you want to share?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk about my story. I've gotten, repeated comments about how it's inspiring. It's actually a few people have said it's inspired their action already, and that's that again, dopamine hit, right?
Yeah,
um
sure.
so for me, I want to share all the information I can that can help people, and I'm going to be putting more of that out there for as free information for people to use through my website and through LinkedIn and through some of the other social media places. And, if I can help accelerate that, through one-on-one or through some of my group programs, well, that's even better. But, I just want people to be able to, experience the health transformations that I have, and to, experience the sustained energy and the vitality that all that brings.
Yeah, I love that. One of my friends has a tattoo on his forearm and it says, "We're all walking each other home." And I really like that statement because it's
Yeah.
kind of what you're doing. You're further along in the journey than some other people may be. But what you're doing is you're turning around and saying, "Come here, follow me for a few steps." It doesn't have to be forever, but while you're going down this road, let me help you because I've been where you are. And so you have a lot of credibility. And so thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your candor and your willingness to just be open and honest about your journey. I think it's really going to help a lot of people.
Well, thanks, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity that you're given that you've given for me to talk about it here.
Well, again, I think it's going to help a lot of people. So they can reach out to you and you can get that dopamine hit, and then they can turn around to help somebody else. And so we'll just keep this chain going. So as we start the new year here, best of luck to you, Charles, and best of luck to you, listeners. So until next time, take care. If you'd like to become an EMT, a paramedic, or even earn your bachelor's degree in EMS from Texas State University, visit EMTSacademy.com or scan the QR code on your screen. At EMTS Academy, we train the next generation of EMS professionals from the classroom to the field. Thanks for listening, and remember, the world needs more people who can stay calm, think clearly, and save lives. Until next time, stay safe.